Welcome back to the Algarve. Now, it has been known for me to become bored with a bike after a few weeks, so the fact that I've still got the Trident after 3.5 months will give you a clue as to my overall opinion of it. I've watched my first impression videos again to see whether I still feel the same about the bike, and I have to say that the more I ride it, the more I like it, especially since the running in period is now over and I'm free to roam the rev range as I see fit. So let's have a quick run through the key points you should know about before buying the Trident. First, the bike itself as it comes out of the factory, and then I'll take a look at the mods I've made and the accessories I've added. The riding position is very comfortable, handlebars are wide, steering is light. The seat comfort is above average, still get a numb bum but only after about 2 hours riding, which is good for me. The BMW F900XR I had last season was much less comfortable, for example, and I was having to stop for a break after only 45 minutes or so. The mirrors are okay, almost totally free of vibration, and rear visibility is on a par with other bikes in the class. I thought about changing them for some nice Triumph bar end mirrors, but haven't bothered, as these inevitably add to the bike's width, making filtering through traffic a bit more difficult, as well as making loading into my mobile office a bit more awkward. The gear change is really excellent, especially if you opt for the quickshifter as I did. Not only does this make for exhilarating if slightly unnecessary and childish acceleration, it also makes the gear change smoother when you do operate the clutch manually, which I do 95% of the time. It's as if the gearbox is saying to you, "Oh, thanks, I can change when you just use your foot, but if you wouldn't mind helping me out a little with your left hand, I'll make the gear change extra smooth for you." If you get just one accessory from the Triumph catalogue, I would definitely recommend the quickshifter. Power. Is 80 horsepower enough? Well, in my initial reviews I said it would be nice to have an extra 25 horsepower, and I kind of still think that actually. Yes, 80 horsepower is ample 95% of the time, but on that odd occasion, you know, when you're overtaking, you're already at the legal speed limit, but you just need a quick boost for a couple of seconds to complete your manoeuvre in safety. Well, that's when I miss the 120 horsepower I had on my 2017 Street Triple. I prefer the Trident in every other way. It's cheaper, more comfortable, more economical, and has a lot more usable low down torque, but that extra shove I had above 7,000 is lacking on the Trident. Oh yes, that and the Brembo brakes from the Street Triple. The Tridents are good enough and they pull up the bike no problem, and for once the rear brake actually has some genuine stopping power, but we're still quite away from the phenomenal M50s on the Triple. I remember at one point in my motorcycling career I found myself with just two bikes in my garage, the Street Triple and our little 9 horsepower Honda Vision scooter. When I used to jump on the Triumph after riding the scooter, the thing that struck me most actually wasn't the power difference, but the difference in the braking. We all tend to focus on the power of the engine, but the brakes are just as important, and this is perhaps something less experienced riders don't quite understand until they've felt a really expensive setup firsthand. So I'll give the Trident's brakes a 7 out of 10. They're good, but I for one would be prepared to pay an extra £500 or so for some even meatier ones. One thing I can't complain about with the Trident though is the fuel consumption. Over the 3.5 months I've been riding it, the Trident has averaged 4.6 litres per 100 kilometres, at least according to the onboard computer, which I've never reset. This equates to about 61 mpg UK or 51 US, which, given the kind of spirited mountain riding I frequently indulge in, is very acceptable and certainly a lot better than the 7 litres per 100 kilometres I used to get on my Street Triple, although this did have 50% more power, so it kind of makes sense that fuel consumption was also 50% higher. Now, I initially criticised the Trident suspension, and although I have got used to the firmness, I would still argue that it's an unnecessarily racy setup for this kind of bike. I rode the new Speed Triple yesterday, and that too is rock hard, way more so than the Trident in fact. I just don't get it. These are naked road bikes. If you want a bike specifically for track days, then surely you go for a sports bike with its fairings, hunched up riding position and clip-ons. I doubt Triumph watch these videos, but just in case you are, please, I don't mind slowing down a bit for bends and roundabouts. You can dial down the suspension a little bit. I might arrive at my destination 5 seconds later, but at least getting there will have been more comfortable. The exhaust note's good though, can't take that away from the bike. The unique Triumph triple sound. Sorry if you don't know what I'm talking about here. It's a bit like when people say they can smell burning clutch, but if you've never smelt it then you've no idea what they're talking about. You need to hear the sound of the Trident or the Street Triple, they're virtually indistinguishable, to understand what I'm talking about here. No real need for an aftermarket exhaust on this bike then, other than perhaps for aesthetic reasons, because the catalyst, although tucked away under the bike, is pretty big. Fit and finish, well, apart from a couple of faux pas where Triumph have clearly and unnecessarily gone for the cheap option, I'm thinking these silver screws on the back of the otherwise black clock, or the AliExpress rear brake lever, the finish is very good. The switches are just as good as they were on my Street Triple and those on the new Speed Triple, even if the horn button could have been made a little bit easier to press in an emergency. The vinyl Triumph have chosen for the seat seems to be holding up fine, although it is very prone to marking. I'm always finding strange stains on the seat that I've never had on other bikes, and the back pockets of my riding jeans always leave an imprint after every ride. It's an odd material, difficult to describe. Imagine a really thick condom and you're almost there. But it seems to work and certainly grips you well enough under braking or hard acceleration. The paintwork, especially the tank, is really excellent, no complaints there. Although it's a pity the giant Triumph logo isn't painted on, because the vinyl decal they used is quite thick, especially under the clear coat. Details, eh? The Michelin Road 5 tyres have been absolutely faultless so far, plenty of grip in the dry, although living in southern Portugal I haven't had the opportunity to test them in the wet, but given the tread pattern and Michelin's reputation, I've no doubt they will excel. I really like the clock design too. I was coming from BMW's all singing, all dancing colour TFT screen, but I don't miss that at all. All I ever really look at when I'm riding is the speed and occasionally the petrol gauge or gear indicator. The Trident screen is perfectly legible, even in the bright sunshine, of which there is a lot here, and I certainly never miss being able to share my maximum lean angle, for example, on social media. How about manoeuvrability? Well, like all other Triumphs I've ridden, the turning circle is not brilliant, and I often get caught out when performing slow U-turns, for example, because you reach full lock far more quickly than you do with other makes of bike. So it's not the easiest bike to manoeuvre in and out of the garage, for example, but it's not a huge problem. You just have to be aware of that particular limitation. What about wind blast? Well, I went back to a naked this year because I rarely get the chance to ride over 100 kilometers an hour on the roads down here. There are just 2 motorways, both limited to 120. And while I do occasionally use them, most of the places I ride to, like this, tend to be on roads limited to 70 or 90 kilometers an hour. I think here it was 70. Consequently, wind blast isn't really an issue for me, although I have heard that the optional tiny fly screen is quite effective at pushing air over the top of the rider's helmet. So, what modifications have I made, or do I intend making? Well, as you can see, the first things to go were the red highlights. I ordered a silver bike for the luscious paintwork on the tank, and it does really pop in the sun, but I always thought the red bits were a bit unnecessary, especially when one of my viewers said that the stickers on the front mudguard looked like L plates, which learner riders have to put on their bikes in the UK. So I covered those with some vinyl and bought a pair of silver radiator cowls from the dealer. The obligatory grip puppies on the bars to make things more comfortable and lessen vibration, Bluetooth connectivity, which I finally got to pair with my iPhone after what must have been 20 attempts. Worth having for the navigation, but I switch off all the notifications so as not to be distracted when I'm riding. And I'm too much of a cheapskate to buy a GoPro, so can't comment on that feature either. The non-adjustable factory levers don't look great in silver, and the clutch lever in particular was a bit of a stretch even for my large hands, so I swapped them out for a pair of black levers from Tech Parts in the UK. I initially changed the horn for a Denali sound bomb, but despite sounding awesome, it was a bit too large physically for the Trident and stuck out like the proverbial sore thumb, so I've just removed it and fitted it to my Honda Grom, where the ridiculous sound is even more incongruous. So what about the swing arm mounted number plate that gets everyone so hot under the collar? Well, I think it would look a lot better, or at least less ugly, if Triumph had somehow managed to incorporate the indicators into the underseat cowl next to the brake light. I'm guessing there just wasn't enough width to play with, so they had to put them in this rather awkward position over the plate. I'm not convinced, however, about the aesthetic merits of your traditional underseat tail tidy. The weird swing arm is unique, well, specific to the Triumph, and I'm loath to start tearing it apart only to regret my decision further down the line. We'll see what the aftermarket boys come up with. Who's the Trident for then? Well, me for one. It's definitely one of the best bikes I've ever had, and I'm including my 2017 Street Triple in the list. It's affordable to buy and run. It feels expensive, or more expensive than it actually is, and has just enough power to keep you entertained. It's surprisingly fun too, way more so than the F900XR I was riding last year, despite being 25 horsepower down. Maybe the exhaust note has a lot to do with this, or possibly the low down torque, but I always relished the idea of taking my Trident out, something I never really did with the BMW. I think the Trident would make a great first big bike for someone who's just passed their test, and because it's relatively affordable compared to some of today's showroom queens, you're not overly concerned about dropping or otherwise damaging it. 3.5 months in, and I still haven't begun thinking about trading it in, which is something of a record. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching.